when you're getting into watch collecting, you will hear tons of different terms. Sadly, it's so many that this can actually turn off some people from collecting watches altogether. So with this video, we're going to be giving you 7 terms that every watch collector should know. First off is movement. This is the guts of the watch and how the watch is powered. There are 2 main types of movements that you should know about: mechanical and quartz. Mechanical movements actually have 2 subsets of their own. Automatic movements are what most luxury watchmakers use today, and it uses a weight within the watch rotating to wind the watch and power it. The other type of mechanical movement is a hand wound movement. With these, you usually need to turn the watch's crown in order to wind the watch and keep it running. Another term that's worth noting for mechanical watches is the term caliber. Caliber is what basically represents the kind of movement that's in the watch. For example, Omega has their 8800 movement that's very popular in the Seamaster line today, and it's not uncommon for multiple watches to have the same movement across a brand, so keep that in mind. But if you see the term caliber, it's talking about the movement that's in the watch. What about the other kind of movement though? Well, quartz movements rose to prevalence in the 1970s, and it really shook up the Swiss watch industry. These movements are battery powered and use an electronic oscillator regulated by a quartz crystal in order to keep time. Quartz watches are actually more accurate as far as keeping time than mechanical watches, but most luxury watchmakers today use mechanical movements because they have to be handcrafted and take a lot more time and skill to produce. Another term you will hear when you're getting into luxury watches is the term model. Now, this is pretty self-explanatory, and just like cars, models are the same type of watch under a brand. For example, the Submariner from Rolex is a model of watch. There can be other styles of that watch, for example, a blue or a black or a red. It doesn't matter as far as that goes, but they are all Submariner. They're part of the Submariner model. Other examples of this include the Seamaster and Speedmaster from Omega, the Explorer 2 and GMT Master from Rolex, and the Carrera and Aqua Racer from Tag Heuer. Now, while there can be multiple styles of watch under a same model, each style gets something called a reference or reference number, and that's actually our next term. Reference refers to the identifier that watch companies give to a specific watch. Finding the reference number to a watch that you're interested in can make shopping for it, for example, much easier. It is worth noting though that even subtle, small changes to a watch, like the band that the watch comes with from the watchmaker, can change the reference number. It's also worth noting that some watchmakers are a little looser with reference numbers, and you might be able to find a reference number that has multiple watch styles with it. It really does depend on the brand, but reference numbers are on every single luxury watch out there. An example of a reference number is 16570 for the Rolex Explorer 2, or this number from Omega for a black on black Seamaster on a black rubber strap. Speaking of straps, our next set of terms revolves around straps and bands. This is specifically referring to the bracelet that holds the watch on your wrist. Some popular types of bands are metal bands, leather straps, and NATO straps, and these can even have their own subsets. For example, at Rolex you have Oyster and Jubilee, both metal bands with their own specific names, but don't stress about that at this moment. Just know that the main straps that you'll see out there are leather, NATO, and metal. Also, don't be afraid to switch out your bands. For example, you could switch a metal band to a NATO band, completely change the feel of the watch, and in some cases make it look better to you or worse. It kind of just depends. But there are so many bands out there. There are even more than the 3 we listed here, but we don't want to overcomplicate this video. Just know those are the main 3, and switch out your bands. These watches look great on more than just the band they came with from the factory. Now, our last 2 terms are things that we want you to keep in mind when you're buying a luxury watch, and the first is power reserve. This is something you're only going to look for on mechanical movements, but power reserve is how much time the watch can run if it is fully wound. So you wind the watch all the way up, how long does it run before it stops running? Real world times of this will vary, but it's something to keep in mind as you buy watches, especially when you go from one watch that you're wearing every day to 2 to 3 to 5 to 7 to 10 watches. Power reserve is something you start to think about more as what watches are going to die, what watches can I wear every 3-4 days without them dying, and things like that. So it's important to know your power reserves when you're going into buying these watches. That way you can know in the back of the head how much time you kind of have left. Lastly, we have water resistance, and this is usually measured in bars or meters, and it's how deep your watch can go before the pressure builds up too much and your watch starts taking on water. It is also worth noting that water resistance changes over time, and you should never trust the water resistance of older watches. And there you have it, the top 7 terms that we think every watch collector should know. What terms did we miss? Let us know in the comments, and we'll probably post a follow-up to this video. But now that you know all of these terms, how about you go and see the best watches that you can buy right now under $10,000?